if the weather is the same where you're at as here in Columbus, but certainly weather changed quite a bit. And it's winter time and it looks like it's here to stay. So Jenny's going to be jumping on. She had an appointment leading right up to noon today, so she might be a few minutes late. Let me ask anybody, I know I ask this every month and it seems like nobody's willing to jump on, but I'd love to hear anybody from outside of Columbus have like a 30-second market update in terms of what you guys are seeing in your market if you're outside of Columbus. Come on, somebody's gotta have something to say. Looking, I guess most everybody's from Columbus. Rebecca, are you here in Columbus? Oh, maybe Rebecca can't chat. All right, well, you guys are gonna make me talk to myself, so I'll get rolling. Oh yeah, Rebecca, so how's your market there? Is it are you seeing a pretty big increase in active listings? All right, well, I'm gonna roll. I'd love you guys definitely put in the chat if you have anything to add, but just don't want to jump on to the video. But I'd love to hear how things are going in your local market, or even frankly, if you're in Columbus. I think one of the things that I've definitely seen in the market is different price ranges and different areas moving. This isn't going to show up in any data that I have, but I've definitely seen on a couple of the listings I have that things slowed down quite a bit at the end of October through the election last week. And then last weekend got, I would say, a significant increase in activity. Now, was that due to the election getting over? Was that due to the interest rate drop that we'll talk about here in a minute? It's hard to say, but it'll be interesting to see what the next couple weeks brings in the market. So what's up, Jenny?
Hi, sorry about that. Had to finish up that coaching call. Just hitting the ground running today.
All good, all good. Well, let's jump in. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and go through the numbers real quick. And then we're going to do something a little bit different. Jenny's going to kind of go over a really high level view of what the Lexington market looks like. But mostly we're just going to talk about how do we implement all of these numbers into conversations with our buyers and sellers, because I think it's, one thing to have a really good grasp on the numbers, but it's another thing to actually translate that to our clients and how does that impact their decisions. So I'm excited for that. And hopefully those of you that have your cameras off will be able to turn your cameras on and participate, because even though Jenny and I can both talk a lot, we'd love to get your interaction. So I'm going to go ahead and run through these stats here real quick. Feel free to interrupt. Feel free to throw stuff in the chat throughout. Jenny, if you see anything, go into the chat. If you don't mind interrupting me, let me know. That would be awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and get the slideshow rolling. Maybe I just went on my other screen. Gotta love technology. All right, can you guys see the slideshow, or do you see PowerPoint?
PowerPoint.
Okay, that's what I thought. Let's go to the screen. All right, sweet. Okay, so obviously we're in November, believe it or not, which I'm struggling still to believe, but the weather's making me realize it quickly. But most of the data that we're going to be looking at is going to be looking at October to October in terms of the trends. So we're going to look at national inventory and selling trends, and then, like I said, some local selling trends as well. We're going to take a look at interest rates, which is finally a good topic. I mean, as good as it can get. It's moving in the right direction, let's say. Inflation, same thing. First good news in a while. And then we're going to talk about becoming the local economist of choice. So that's going to be both with interest rates and lending, and then also a kind of a panel discussion on how to implement the data. So let's jump right into to our listing and numbers conversation. So active listings is up. These are national numbers, are up about 33% year over year. So that's pretty significant when we compare last year to this year. But the perspective, which I've tried to talk about throughout this year when I started doing these things, is that compared to the average number of active listings in a month from 2017 to 2019, we're still 40% lower than that average. And so the important thing to take away from that, in my opinion, is that everybody wants to compare this year to last year, which last year was a year in real estate that some of us may never see again in our career, in terms of the low inventory, in terms of the craziness of the market. Certainly, I've had my license for coming up on it's 18 and a half years almost, and I've never seen a market like we saw, over last year. And so chances are it could be a 20, 30, 40 year type of year. And so comparing this year to last year just isn't really a super fair comparison. So I think that definitely puts it into perspective a little bit. So the next thing we're going to look at here are pending sales. So pending sales are on the steep decline. We are nearing 2019 pending sales. I thought maybe we were going to go into a little bit of a leveling off period between July and September. It seemed like the downward trend was slowing a little bit, but obviously we had a pretty big drop off in October nationally. Now, if we look at years past, we did still see that happen in November. From November to December. So if we see a similar decline happen again, we could get closer to that trend line from 2017 and 2018, which is definitely something that we're looking at. Next thing, I'm having some trouble here with my screen. Sorry, guys. My screen is new listings. So one of the things that, in my opinion, is saving the market a little bit from the perspective of price declines, it is this graph here. And that is that new listings are down significantly compared to really any time over the last 5 years. And so what that's doing is that's keeping inventory levels really tight, which is offsetting the decrease in the number of buyers making buying decisions right now. So basically what I mean by that, if you have 10 houses on the market and last year there were 9 buyers and this year there are only 5 buyers, there's a big decline in the number of people that are actually buying homes. But because the listings now are no longer 10, they're only 7, you really only saw about a 10% adjustment in the number of buyers compared to the number of active homes available. And so that the drop in new listings is definitely saving us from seeing, really, really large increases in inventory, which typically would result in sometimes significant drops in price. And this is another graph that kind of shows that. So actually the days on market compared to last year are only up 6 days on market on average from October to October, which again, given the fact that there are 30% more listings, the fact that we've only gone up on average by 1 day on market, I think is pretty significant in showing that homes are still selling relatively quickly compared to historical trends. And actually last month we had increased 7 days over last year, and now we're only 6 days above last year, so that's pretty significant in my opinion. Median list price is down but is flattening, so we saw kind of pretty big declines nationally from June through September, but now that is starting to flatten a little bit. So again, we will see if that trend continues. We may have just created a new trend line, meaning, based on this graph, we went back to kind of April pricing after peaking in June. But if that kind of trend continues and we see kind of a flat or just very slight decline over the next few months, which is very normal for the winter period nationally, then we probably have stayed in pretty decent shape. Price reductions, definitely a trend. So we're nearing pretty much, let's call it, we're there in terms of the percentage of the market that is seeing a price reduction to the highest number that we've seen over the last 5 years. So definitely more significant. We're about twice as high as we were last year. So we were at about 10% of the market seeing a price reduction in last October, and this October we're at almost 21%. So a 10.3% increase year over year. Our local market, I'll speed through this because I know a lot of you are from Columbus, but I also know a lot of you are not. So Jenny will jump into a little bit from Lexington. But new listings in October were down 16.5%, but active listings were up 30.2%. And if we go down here, what's pretty significant is active listings in November month to date so far this year over last year are up 50%, which is big numbers, but not big number of listings. It's only about 1,000 more listings, and we have 40,000 sales every year, but that's significant. Solds month to date in November are down 40%, which is a pretty big number. October, they were down 25%. So you're seeing the difference between the number of sold properties and the number of new listings be about 10%. And so that's kind of right in line with the pendings being down 13. So yeah, pretty big declines, but still, again, I think we're not feeling it nearly as much because new listings are down so much. Days on market, we're seeing kind of the same thing, actually a little bit less impact compared to national average, going up from 17 days on average up to 20 days. And then original list price to sales price, still only about 2% lower, but we're about 6% off of the high that we saw over the summer. Local months of supply has increased pretty significantly over the last couple of months, but still only at 1.3 months of inventory. Remember, National Association of Realtors says that a balanced market is 4 to 6 months of inventory. So we're still significantly below what would be considered a balanced market, way below a buyer's market. For those of you, I won't make anybody raise their hand, but for those of you that were in the market in 2008 through 11, we would have died for 1.3 months of inventory. So definitely still a pretty good market to sell a house in, as long as proper expectations are set. Average sales price in Columbus has reduced by 0.3% compared to September, but the active list price is actually up 0.7%. So that's interesting. But if we look at year over year, we're still up 10.3%. So the majority of home sellers still, or homeowners still have significant equity in their property, which is what that number is telling us. Interest rates, so happy to announce to finally do one of these where interest rates are headed in the right direction. For those of you that were taking a long weekend because of Veterans Day last week, on Thursday, we saw much better than expected inflation numbers, which we'll get to on the next slide. And so that led to about a 0.6% drop in interest rate. So the 30-year fixed here locally dropped to, most of the lenders were quoting like 6.25 to 6.5, which is really almost 1% lower than it was about a week ago. So pretty significant buying power for most buyers. Showing on this screen here the difference in people's payment from last January through now. So definitely chipping away at this a little bit with the interest rate decrease. And this was the inflation numbers that caused that decline. And the reason why interest rates declined is because the lower inflation numbers makes investors believe that the Fed will stop raising rates. And so basically mortgage rates follow the bond market. And so they get that immediate change. Whereas obviously the Fed funds rate, which you probably hear mostly in the news about rates going up, that has to be changed by the Fed. So basically core inflation was supposed to go up 0.5% and only went up 0.3%. And year over year, it was supposed to be up 6.5% and was only up 6.3%. Again, it still isn't good for all of us to have to buy things, but the trend, meaning that the trend of increased inflation is slowing, that's what really they're looking for. All right, so one of the things, like I said, that I wanted to add was becoming the local economist of choice. So we're going to jump right into that in a second. Jenny, do you want, I can stop sharing my screen for a second. Do you want to talk any more about Lexington and Richmond? I know we didn't get a chance to throw those numbers in the slide, but what are you seeing similar trends there in Kentucky, or are you seeing something different?
Well, and primarily the reason for sending what I sent over to you was to show for those that are from our local MLS here, that you do have those statistics that are broken down the same way that Troy shared for the Columbus market. We had that same kind of access. Now, for some reason, our board is always a month behind, so we don't have October numbers yet, but we're definitely seeing very similar things here. I would 100% agree. One thing that my team and I look at every single day is the hot sheet. And it just gives a tremendous, just a fabulous snapshot. So for example, in our local market, in the past 72 hours, because we'll look at the weekend and then from here on out, it'll be the past 24 hours. I'm sorry, guys. I've been battling a cough or allergies forever now. We had 131 new listings. We had 148 go under contract. So we're still not keeping up with the demand. And then as Troy talked about the price change, we had 104 price changes in that same 72-hour period. So there's definitely, when you start to know your numbers so well in your market, you can be like, oh my gosh, this time, in April, we weren't seeing price changes like that. So I always think it's very interesting to look at that. I'm blessed to have an assistant that sends it out every day to the team because it's just right here on my phone. And that, you talk about being the local economist of choice. It's, as I always tell my teammates, that it's not, you're not a pretty face opening doors. Anybody can open a house up and let people, see it. If you don't really understand what's happening in the market, you can't talk intelligently with your client when they look at you and go, should I list my house? And you're like, absolutely. And let me tell you why. So having those daily hot sheet numbers and looking at that every single day, I think is a huge saving grace. Yeah, well, there you go. So that's what we look at. And like I said, through the week, it'll just be a 24-hour period.
Okay. So, obviously, new listings, 131, 36 contingent. So that's, saying that 36 plus 112, so 148.
Yes, 148. Yep.
Okay. So are those new properties in contract, or do people change it from contingent to pending, like after the inspection is?
I don't know that that happens that often. I think these are just ones that literally went straight to pending and then straight to contingent.
Okay, cool. So
Yep.
basically in the last 72 hours, more properties went into contract than were listed.
Yep.
Okay, interesting. Cool.
Yes. So our market, and just like you and I talked on the phone, Troy, it really depends on, from suburb to suburb. it could be one county, it could be one zip code in Lexington to another zip code in Lexington. It's certain price ranges, because when people say, is it a buyer's market or is it a seller's market, you really can't give that a blanket. It might be different in Madison County where we sell, in Richmond, Kentucky, and it might be different in Lexington. And then in Lexington, it might be, one price point to another price point. You put a $250,000 house on the market over here, there's going to be multiple offers.
Okay, cool. Does anybody else have anything to add, whether you're in, I know we were planning on having somebody from the Southern Indiana office on, and he got sick today. So we don't have a representative on our panel here, but if anybody is on the Zoom, or if anybody's on the Zoom from anywhere else in the country, definitely would be curious as to how your markets are looking. Anybody want to volunteer? No? All right. All right. So like we said, obviously, and like Jenny mentioned, we want to be able to speak intelligently about the market. So Jenny, that literally what takes your assistant like 30 seconds to screenshot that and email it to you. So, so definitely it's not a challenging thing. It looks like you guys probably have Flex MLS as well, I'm assuming.
Yep. And Troy, somebody just asked in the chat if you all had that hot sheet in Ohio.
Yes, we do. So if you go to the MLS welcome screen, that hot sheet, you can either be, I think it's on there automatically, but if it's not, you can add it as a widget. And
you can personalize it. Yeah, you can personalize it. We just tend to look at the whole MLS, which is, for us, it is 33 counties. So that happened in 33 counties, which when you think about that, it's the majority of it is going to be in the higher populated areas. But
yeah, absolutely. Cool. So so this was one I didn't prep you on this, Jenny. So if you don't want to talk about it, that's okay. Or but I feel like one of the opportunities to come off as the local economist of choice in this market, with the changing rates and the challenges of affordability, is to really understand lending at a higher level. I know for me in 2008, that was a huge thing that was able to help me make it through a shifting market, was just being able to understand the different loan programs and help people. Because what I've always found is the more barriers there are to getting a transaction done, the more likely somebody is to get uncomfortable and just pause. So what I mean by that is, specifically with buyers, if I send them to lender A because I didn't know the pre-qualifying questions to ask them, and lender A tells them that their payment to buy the house that they want is going to be $2,500 and their payment threshold was $2,000, they might just decide to rent for another year, because they assume, after going through and filling out the application and all of that, that they can't buy. And if I come in at that point and say, oh, wait, actually, lender B can offer you a better rate, they may have already made up their mind that they're going to lease for a year. And now, like, they're still going to be a buyer next year, but they may not buy this year. Whereas if I ask a few more questions in the pre-qualification process to understand what their payment is, and I have the ability to understand what their risk tolerance is, meaning, are they okay with an adjustable rate mortgage, or would they be okay with a 2-1 buy down or something like that, then I would send them to that lender that's going to offer them those less conservative, we could call it more risky, however you want to do it, products. and keep them from, having that fatigue, because the reality is people like the path of least resistance. And usually when they get told no once, unless they have to move, have to move, they usually will just clam up. And when people are nervous, anxious, or uncomfortable, they usually choose to do nothing. Has that been your experience, Jenny?
Yes. And Troy, I didn't realize you and I are the same length of time in the business, 18 and a half years. So, I survived the 8, 9, 10, 11, all that fun stuff. And it used to be 2-1 buy downs, even back then, were a thing, so to speak. And it was interesting because I myself, as this has been, resurfaced as a tool to get people into homes, totally forgot about 2-1 buy down, that the seller pays it, that money goes into a separate account. And if the buyer is able to refinance at a lower rate sooner, whatever's remaining in that account is given back to the buyer. And that's a thing. If you don't know about 2-1 buy downs, that you can talk to your clients about it, you definitely need to meet with your favorite lender that offers that and have a really good understanding of what that means. So you're not explaining it to them, but you're at least being a resource to give them the highlights, and then they can decide if that's an avenue they want to pursue.
Yeah, the other thing I think that everybody should educate themselves on is adjustable rate mortgages, or commonly called ARMs. I know, unfortunately, the local lender here was offering a 5-1 ARM at 2% less than par rates, which was amazing. But they got so many applications that last week, I guess they raised it. So it's only about 1% lower than par rates right now. But still 1%, depending on what the loan amount is, can be a pretty significant difference in your payment. And basically by taking a 5-1 ARM versus a 30-year fixed, you're essentially making a bet that 30-year rates are going to come down somewhere in that 5 to 5.5% range at some point in the next 5 years, where you're going to have the ability to refinance. And I think most experts believe that will happen, most likely much sooner than 5 years. But the other thing is, especially if you're with a first-time buyer, or you're in a situation, I was just have a buyer relocating here, and they know almost certainly that their job is going to move them again within 3 years. So the value of a 30-year fixed mortgage is almost zero. And so understanding those products and being able to talk through that, because the reality is everybody watched The Big Short, and the number one thing that they realized was that adjustable rate mortgages were the devil. And that's what caused 2008 and all of that stuff. And it was a component, but it certainly wasn't the root only cause. The root cause was unqualified buyers were getting loans.
Right.
And at the same time, a huge recession happened. It would have been like 2 years ago, everybody moving into adjustable rate mortgages was zero down. And then now we have a recession, and then next comes job loss, and nobody has any equity. So we're not in that situation in any way. But like Jenny said, I would strongly encourage you, if you're on this call and you haven't met with your lender lately, trust me, they're all hurting for business, and they're all wanting to take you out to lunch and coffee. So go take advantage of it and pick their brain on what products they have. And frankly, if they don't have any unique products, you need to go add a couple more lenders to, go ask the experienced agents in your office, like, hey, what lender do I need to talk to that has unique products? Because some of my favorite lenders didn't have that 5-1 ARM that I was talking about a couple weeks ago. So I had to move some of my clients that had gotten pre-qualified with some of my favorite lenders over to, this one in particular that had this great product that no one else had. If you're with Keller Williams, remember, you also have Keller Mortgage as an option, which offers low closing costs to your buyers. So again, maybe somebody has that money and they can use it to do a 2-1 buy down, or, use it to do something different with their financing if you go through Keller Mortgage. So just learn. That's the big thing.
And Troy, and I apologize. They have bold going on here today, so it is very loud in the office. And I think they just broke for lunch because it sounds insanely loud around me. So I apologize. I'll try to mute myself. But we did have a couple of questions about the 2-1 buy down. And the 2-1 buy down cost, really, it depends on the loan amount. Is that correct, Troy? Am I saying that right?
Correct.
Yeah. And so it really is very specific. Somebody gave an example recently to me of like a $500,000 house, and it was like $12,000 to do the 2-1 buy down, but it saved the buyer $600 a month in their payment. So you can see it would be impactful to them if the seller paid for that.
Yeah. And Tracy said Keller Mortgage is adding products. Yeah. I mean, we just went through a period of about a decade where every lender pretty much had the same product. And it was just like, hey, just call any lender, their rate might be a little bit better here or there, but it was really about who's going to provide the best service, or maybe lower closing costs through Keller Mortgage or something like that. But we are in a time period right now where that is absolutely not the case. And sometimes, like I said, week by week, for example, that lender who was offering the 5-1 buy down, they were amazing. And now they're pretty much in line with everybody else on the 5-1 arm, or not the 5-1 buy down, the 5-1 arm, sorry. So you need to be on top of it almost weekly and be having conversations about where people are at and what's going on, so you can be the expert.
There was a local lender here that actually texted, and I shared this with a bunch of agents because not everybody's on the same, whatever playing field with different lenders. They you have different people. But anyway, it said Guardian Savings Bank is doing in-house portfolio 5-year ARMs. Today, the rate is 4.875. And their closing costs are $500 plus recording fees of $130, and then they have a couple other fees, so super cheap. But here everybody else is offering 7%, and he's offering 4.875.
Yep, that's
huge.
Yeah, that's almost the exact same product that we had here. But that's the thing; these local banks, like, everything's a portfolio, because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's 5-1 arm is it's not worth it. It's only like a 1/4 point better than the 30-year fix. So in my opinion, the risk is not worth the reward there. But if you can get 2% off your interest rate, that's a big deal. So yeah, I know somebody asked about local lenders here. The mortgage broker I use is Anthony Leahy with Affinity Mortgage. I also use David Arocha with NFM Lending a lot. So those are my two main go-tos. But again, I think as much as I love them and I think they do a great job, if somebody else comes out with a better product, my job as an agent is, well, first of all, sales are down. And we all get paid when houses sell. So there's going to be 20% fewer homes to sell over the next, compared to last year. And so if I have the opportunity to get a home sold by moving them from my preferred lender to somebody who can get the job done because it works for the client, first of all, it's in the best interest of the client. Second of all, that's what we have to do. So I commend all of you guys for being on this call, because frankly, there should be 500 people on this call, because I know for a fact that most other agents aren't doing this research. And so you've already got a leg up on the competition of just being in the know on this. And frankly, part of the reason I do this every month is because it forces me to look up the numbers. When I have to prepare that slideshow for you, I have to do the research, and now I can regurgitate that to my own clients for the rest of the month. So it holds me accountable to making sure I'm on top of it as well. Anything else on lending, Jenny, or anybody else?
I don't have anything else to offer on that.
Okay, cool. Hey, Justin, does Vinton County National Bank, do they do all of Ohio?
Yeah,
Or at
I'm
least,
pretty sure. Though I know for sure Southern Ohio, and then they have a branch in Grove City. So I would assume they would obviously serve Franklin as well, even though they're out of Benton County and they don't sell them off, they service them. So
yeah, and that's going to be most of these because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's rates are crap when it comes to ARMs. So almost all of these that are good rates on ARMs are doing that. Justin, is that for a 5/1 ARM?
that, or is there like a 3-3, I want to say?
Okay, that's interesting too.
Can you educate me on what the first two numbers are for, Troy?
Yeah, so the first number is the number of years that your initial rate is fixed. So a 5/1 ARM is fixed at, let's call it 4.75 for 5 years. And then the second number is the frequency at which it can adjust after that. So a 5/1 ARM would be fixed for 5 years and then can adjust every year after that. A 3/3 ARM would be fixed for 3 years, but then it can only adjust every 3 years after that. Now, along with that, though, the other things you want to look for are there's usually a capped amount that it can increase or decrease. So if it's like, let's say it's based off of prime, which is usually what those are based off of, some arbitrary number that is in the market, then it would say that it's prime +2, let's say, but it can only adjust by 1% every year, for example. So if you have a 5.75 or a 4.75% rate and the annual cap that it can increase or decrease is 1%, then the most that it could go up to in year 6 would be 5.75. But then there's also usually a lifetime cap. So it may say it can only increase by 1% per year up to 8.25%. So meaning that no matter what interest rates are, the highest that rate could go would be 8.25. But my opinion is that 30-year fixed rates are going to come back down into the fives. And so most of the people that have those adjustable rates will just keep those until rates go back down, which there's talk of it happening as quickly as, Q2 of next year. And then they would refi into a 30-year fixed and never see the adjustable portion of those loans. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much for explaining
Cool.
that.
Yeah.
And Justin, Susan asked who your contact is.
I gotta make some calls, man.
I'll put it in the chat. It's Andrea something. Let me look it up and I'll put it in the chat.
Cool. Thanks, Justin. That's huge for all of you Columbus folks. Jen, do you have any Marysville banks that have anything like that you're aware of? No? Jen Courtright?
Sorry. No, I don't know.
Okay. I was like, yeah, I'm looking at you, Jen. I'm looking at you.
I was reading and I heard you say Marysville and I was like, oh shoot, was he talking to me?
Cool.
No, but I
Now
can
she
reach
has
out to some
homework,
of the I can reach out to some of the lenders that we use here and see what they do have. I just don't know of anybody like off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know Union Savings was the one that that my mortgage broker was going through, but again, they raised their rates last week because demand was so high. Okay, cool. All right, so the next one, the next thing we wanted to talk about, and the last thing was just how to have the conversation with our clients about pricing in this market, given the stats. So Jenny, why don't you go ahead and start us off in terms of how you're talking to your clients, both listings and buyers, to price correctly for motivated sellers. And then also, how do you get buyers off the fence in terms of buyer reluctancy, given, like questions like, our price is going to go down, our interest rate's going to go down. How do you get somebody to make a decision today?
Yes. So, you and I talked about price against actives, not the sold. So it makes it very challenging right now to price because there's not a lot of actives. And you've really got to look at, the last 30 days, 60 days, rather than what's happening 6 months ago. I don't think anybody's priced against anything from 6 months ago because it's stale data by the time that rolls around. So I think the best thing to do is explain to people, and this is what I tell them, that it is a difficult market. Even 18 and a half years of experience, I still have trouble pricing simply because things have changed so quickly, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of consistency. So I think if you set that expectation up front of, we're going to do our very best in, providing you with the proper data to make a really good decision about pricing, but we're also going to have to look at some of those key things. And Troy and I talked about this on the phone of there's if somebody is very motivated to get their home sold quickly and time is really an issue, that you're going to have to go back to the olden days of, if you have 8 to 10 showings and no offers and no real negative feedback, it's the price. The same thing with, if you don't have any showings and there's very little activity, their house is open 24 hours a day on the internet, it's the price. But as Troy mentioned earlier, when he and I talked, if you have somebody that's in it for the long haul, they don't mind waiting, you can tell them about the pros and the cons of seeing if the market rebounds a little bit. But I think overall, you just have to, as long as you have those expectations up front, and that's what I'm very clear with my people about. It's like, okay, this is what I think is going to happen, but understand, and I joked with Troy that I attended a class not too long ago, and the guy said, we used to do CMAs, competitive market analysis, and now we do PFAs, pull it from the air. So I still think there's some of that going on, because I put one on the market, blew my mind, sold like that, put another one on the market, and I was like, we have no showings. What is happening? This is so weird. It's a very unique property. It's really an exciting thing to have in our market, which is in Fayette County, you can't subdivide under 40 acres. So when you get a 12-acre tract with a house on it, that's a hot commodity here. Well, my activity is slow, super slow. So today, when we meet a seller or a buyer at 4 o'clock to walk those property lines, I'm hoping that this is the one we're going to figure out how to make it work. Because, what sellers don't understand too sometimes is that first offer is your best offer, and they really need to consider it. I have somebody now that's been reduced twice, and now we're sitting here with little to no activity, and the offer that we got was $10,000 below their list price. It was a $600,000 house, but I dealt with a son that knew more than I did. So you get into that, and you have to really come with the numbers. And I think when you show people that you have their best interests at heart, it's the best way to attack it, and then come with the numbers and come with the knowledge and that real estate expert that you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Troy. I was gonna let you talk a little.
Oh, were you talking to me? I thought I heard somebody else ask a question, but maybe it was just background noise. Did anybody have any questions on that? No? Okay. One of the things that I agree with everything that you said. One of the things that I just wanted to share for you guys, one of the things that I've been doing, let me try, I got stuff everywhere here, trying to share my screen again. All right, so why is this doing this? All right, hold on. I'm struggling here, guys, with the screen share today. So I'm just gonna do it this way. All right, so one of the things that I think is one strategy to use on pricing is to look at pricing. Can you guys see this median list price page? Do you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. Is to look at the fact, like I mentioned when I was going through this, that basically we're back to like the April timeframe in terms of pricing. And so one of the things that I've been doing is not to say that this is a hard and fast rule, but I do think it's a guide that you can use, is to go back and not pay attention to the sold price in like June, July, August, but pay attention to what it was listed for. Meaning that if something was listed for 450 and sold for 500, I'm kind of saying like, okay, the market said that a 450 house was a good price and they were willing to bid that up. And so instead of listing at 500, which is what we would do previously, because we would say like, because my spiel was, there's two ways that you have to sell the house. You have to find out what the buyer is willing to pay, but then you also have to find out what it will appraise for. Well, the reality is right now, because appraisals are based in the past, at least locally here, we're having very little issue with appraisal. Most of the time, the appraisals are completely fine right now. But what we are having problems with is if you base it on what you would historically with the appraised value of what things sold for in June, July, and August, you might be overpriced to the market. And so if you go back and price it at the 450, have the conversation with the seller that, hey, if the market still says it's worth 500, we'll get those same multiple offers. But if they priced it correctly back then, in a normal market, it would have sold for around list price, right? And so you have to just basically kind of lob off that time period between April and August and say like, hey, we're going back to where we were in April in terms of a list price. And then sometimes you still may get multiple offers, like you said, Jenny, but I think all too often as agents, the biggest mistake we're making is that listings, either the sellers are looking at stuff that sold in July and August and they're identifying their price. And as agents, we're not saying like, hey guys, this is why you need to look at this differently. Or we met with them in June, July, or August. They're finally ready to list their house and we're not rehaving the conversation that, hey, what we talked about in June, July, and August is just not the way it is anymore. And here's the reason why.
And I think those are all such really good points, because I'm having a conversation right now with someone that I literally do try to get out of them what they're hoping for, because it kind of tells you what battle you're going to be up against. Because my conversation is, oh, is there a certain price that you're hoping for? And sometimes people are like, oh gosh, we're hoping it's, blah, blah. And then you'll get the one that I got, which is, I'd like to hear what you say first.
Mm-hmm.
And so finally, after a little bit of conversation, he said, you know what? He goes, actually, I'm going to tell you. And he told me it was like 450 to 500. And I got really quiet. He's like, you don't think so? And I'm like, no, I don't. And honestly, I just looked at the numbers. It's probably more like 425. So when we have our final pricing conversation on Wednesday, I don't think it's going to go that well, because it's a little bit of a rude awakening, and the whole thing of I'm going to wait for prices to come back down. If you take out the years that, we 2008, 9, 10, 11, when we had all this kind of backsliding and a massive correction, or a massive decline, I should say, is if you took those years out and you just applied a nice steady appreciation of 3 to 4% over those years, we'd be right where we are, because it did take a little while to catch up. We're seeing that new construction in our area, like, okay, it's not coming back down. And when you have those comps where the actual cost to build the house is driving it too, I think those are all conversations that you can have with your sellers, to make sure that, they understand what's going on, and make sure they're a part of that conversation. Make sure that you're showing them the comparable sales. Make sure that you're showing them the work that you did to help them get to the price.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just super important to always be updating. And honestly, for those of you that have never been in a market where things don't sell in a week, my biggest piece of advice on listings and keeping them, if they're not selling, is to make sure you're communicating weekly. sending them a market update, even if nothing's happened, letting them know, hey, there was in your school district and area and your, 100,000 on either side of your list price, there were 3 listings that came on the market. This was the price that they came on the market at, and none of them sold, or 2 of them sold, and these were the ones. And based on this information, I think we're priced correctly, or I think we might need to look at a price reduction. And then this is what marketing things, these are what conversations, et cetera, that I've had over the last week. And as long as you're staying in communication with people, with sellers, you will set yourself up for those price reductions. Whereas if you don't talk to them for 3 weeks because you didn't get the showings that you wanted, or nobody sent an offer in, and then you call them and you want a price reduction, it's going to be a much harder conversation. And then the last thing I'll say is, gone are the days where you don't say no to a listing. I mean, sometimes if people want to price at 100,000 more and they don't have a high level of motivation to move, you might have to decline the listing, because you're going to spend all the money on marketing, on pictures, the time, all of that stuff. And if they aren't serious about it, all it's going to get you is a loss of income and a lot of really tough negative conversations as to why you aren't getting my house sold. So make sure that if you do take an overpriced listing, you really like the people, because you're going to be talking to them a lot and having many tough conversations.
Well, and as I heard one time before, when we, had a balanced market, it's like, oh, there's that sign sitting out there. She still hasn't sold it. She still hasn't sold it. She still hasn't sold it. So
Yeah.
It can be a negative marketing for your own brand. But I do think that it, like we've talked about many times, and everybody that's been on Dana's calls and education has heard it. We're back. We're not on a speed-based. Yeah, we're not in a speed-based market. We're in a skill-based market. So if you don't have that listing presentation nailed down, if you don't understand the numbers in your market and what they mean, now's the time to get really serious about understanding it.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, Jenny, thanks so much for jumping on with me. You might have just earned yourself a monthly gig here. So,
well, I'm always happy to provide value if I can.
Cool. Anybody else have any last minute questions here? No? All right. Well, you guys all have a great week. Stay warm if you're anywhere in the Midwest here, because it's going to be a cold one. So enjoy the sunshine while you have it. See you guys.
Bye.